Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful empowered harmonizers. And we are going to zoom in and focus in a little bit more in depth on a great viewer question that we just got in. And that is, how do I get my life back to normal? I have been so devastated by this relationship with someone who I feel essentially is a narcissist. I have exposed them as such. I've come to the conclusion, now what do I do? How do I get my life back to normal? How do I go on and live a happy life? So this is a great viewer question, and this is just going to kind of piggyback on the previous video that we did where we're looking at how to handle the imbalance caused by a narcissist. So for one, it's important to recognize and grow in awareness and kind of reflect on your life looking back and kind of with not an analytic viewpoint, but in a reflective viewpoint. In other words, when did this really begin? When did I really begin to override my internal voice, my inner voice, my natural homeostasis, my instinct that said, you know what, even though this doesn't feel right, I'm going to do this anyway. Even though I'm going to have to swallow, and when I say feel right, I mean feel good. Because when we talk about the balance in the human system, the endocrine system, the neurophysiology, the hormones, the fight or flight, all the neurochemicals, the body wants to be in a state of absence of pain or absence of fear. You know, the body does not like to be agitated. It does not like high degrees of stress. The fight or flight, the fear mechanism, the intimidation that causes that sort of feeling of gripping fear that, you know, you're not as good as, you're not as strong as, you're not as rich as, you're not as skilled as, whatever it is that is in that equation for you when you were entering into this relationship with a narcissist began at some point. So it's important to understand the cause that's created this effect of imbalance or feeling, you know, this feeling of regret or, oh no, I found myself in this horrific relationship. My life is overrun. My life is taken over by this individual, by this situation. The grief has really got the best of me. Peace and harmony. And I'm out of balance. I'm now in a space where I don't want to live. I need to go through a divorce. I need to settle my financials. You know, how do I get back to the good life? And it seems like it's never going to come. It seems like, you know, this will never, ever heal. Well, I have good news for you, and yes, that it would heal. You have to be able to work the program, work the concept, work the tools, work the discussions that we have here, and work on it on a consistent, daily in and out basis. And so, I'm a firm believer in understanding the cause that's created this effect. In other words, look at the point of origin. You know, if you look at it sort of clinically and you sort of, lay it all out in front of you, like, you know, a series of photos, you know, from back in the day that you were going to put in a photo album, if you could like lay them all out and kind of look at, excuse me, what stage in the game did you have the seed planted that you were having to tolerate, put up, or enter into amount of fear, intimidation, or feel that, you know, I'm going to have to be a support person, that I'm not enough to go it alone. I don't have everything that it takes. There's something in me that is missing, or something in me that is now missing that I have missed out on, either a period of my life or a life skill, or a human behavior skill, or a self-care skill, a sort of relationship skill that I either began, the seeds were planted for me to miss out, or I have discovered that I have missed out, or I was taught specific things that caused me to feel that I had to either rely on or listen to this person who was an emotional abuser or manipulator. In other words, when did this all occur? When did I get swept off my feet? When did the love bombing happen? And what did it look like? I mean, what were people saying? What were they doing? How did they make you feel? And when did you have that reaction? And then begin to learn that reactivity state. In other words, well, in order to put up my dukes and defend myself, I had to be reactive. I had to try to be the bigger person. I had to puff up my hair like a cat and go, rare, you know. I had to bark like a dog, you know, like a junkyard dog. I had to fight back. When did you learn that you had to mirror this negative energy? Because if we look at books, you know, that have been written specifically, you know, in the genre of adult children of alcoholics, you will learn that children who grew up in households where there was alcoholism or heavy drinking, the children, you know, learned real quick that they weren't able to regulate their emotions. They were in a setting where things were out of control. They learned, you know, neuromodal imbalance. In other words, they didn't have the modeling of the proper behavior. They didn't have the intervention to say, hey, knock it off. They didn't have the intervention that said, you are lovable just the way you are. And I'm going to support you. Even if you're this, even if you're that, it's okay. I love you just the way that you are. And I've got your back. I've got your sides. I've got your front. I've got you everywhere. You are good to go. I am your caregiver. Excuse me. And so, you know, those children, though, as you can imagine, alcoholics are a way to a kind of a comparison for narcissists, because an alcoholic who is, you know, blacked out, in a stupor, slurring their words, you know, not talking to other people, specifically children, or if they are, they're in slurred language, or, you know, some alcoholics get very quiet, some alcoholics start to yell, some start to hit, some, you know, only drink, they don't eat, or they don't share meals with their children. You know, they weren't learned that balance. So it's a very good example. Just like perhaps you married an alcoholic, and a narcissist is kind of a similar, I would say, just the way you have, you know, those spouses who have to go to Al-Anon. I kind of feel like there's a similar step program for people who, you know, have grown up with narcissistic abuse, psychopathic abuse, emotional neglect, emotional abuse, which patterns and parallels that of an alcoholic. So if you can imagine what an alcoholic would be like around a child, and to see that they're not present, they're not taking the child, you know, they're not even perceptive of the environment. You know, their vision is blurred. They're not hearing things. Their reactions are slow. Perhaps, you know, they're not sharing meals, they're not eating meals, they're not dressing appropriately, or what have you, or, you know, they can't hold down a job. There's a disconnect, of course, in a natural sort of presence. And a narcissist is very much the same way. They're not present. In other words, they've got sort of the chemicals of their ego running their brain. Like, they're super addicted. The ego is like a high for them. You know, like the alcoholic who wants to, you know, start their day with a drink. A narcissist wants to start their day with an ego stroke, you know, an ego boost. You know, they're going to be all about, you know, that persona. They're going to be all about that show. You know, if you go to any major city, you know, you can see people walking, and you can begin to see, you know, who are your narcissists, especially if you've studied it. You can see by the body language, you know, the bravado, or whatever it is that you want to call it, the body will send a million messages. And this can cause a lot of disharmony. And this can be oftentimes the seeds of where your body started to get neurologically rewired to sort of adjust and accommodate to this imbalance. You know, our bodies will pick up in rhythm. Just like if you walk with somebody, you'll begin to eventually be in step. If you're in this relationship with a narcissist, the bigger they get, someone's going to have to get this smaller. So there's going to be an imbalance that takes place, and particularly an imbalance of your thoughts that tell you, you know, to be afraid, to be very afraid, you know, to be afraid that you might lose this person. Be very afraid. You might lose the head, you might lose the roof over your head. You might lose your love interest. You might lose your Valentine. Here comes another celebration. We've got to stick it out through this. We've got to stick it out through the kids. So there's all this sticking it out going on, all this coping, all of this imbalance. So you have to understand that this imbalance is not a natural state. It is a learned state of coping. And yes, as human beings, we all need to adapt and adjust and go through moments of imbalance to restore to balance, and then moments of imbalance to get to a higher balance, So eventually you begin to have more and more accomplishment, achievement, training, focus. You get better at things that you practice. You get better at building things. You get better at photography. You get better at cooking. Your job. Things tend to go where energy flows and where focus flows. And the human being has a natural propensity, whether you've experienced this or not, to, move along that path of improvement, of health, of wellness, and of happiness, and of pleasure. However, there's a good degree that you haven't experienced a lot of this, or maybe even, momentary fits of this only, if you've been in a relationship with a narcissist who has sabotaged you through manipulation, through control, through deceit, through deceiving, through hiding truths, through hiding their history. So you never really kind of know who's there inside. You kind of feel that, as life goes on, you don't really know this person, or you can't be close, or there's a disharmony, a discongruency, and pretty soon a good old disconnect and a good old breakup, or, smash them up, get angry, fight. So this imbalance becomes, it's like a new acclimation. Imbalance becomes the new normal for a lot of people. And sure, you have to push yourself. There's things, your child gets sick, you have to run and you have to, bypass a meal to get them to the doctor right away. There's moments of imbalance. But when it's chronic, it really has a deleterious, negative, and destructive effect on one's physiology, meaning how you feel, and then how you think, how you choose, how you decide, and then what you tolerate. And so if you are with an individual who has a pathological self-importance, the bigger they grow, the smaller you're going to grow if you inhabit the same space, unless you take control, unless you say, no, I'm putting a stop to this. So to answer the question, how to handle the imbalance, first of all, is to go back and understand the cause that's created this effect and understand the reason why. So not only the cause, but the why also. What is the cause and what is the why? Okay, and the cause and the why can be somewhat related, but the why has probably something more personal to do with you. In other words, this is all I've got. This is all I can do. I will never amount to. So you were making these self-limiting beliefs somewhere and factored in. Whether you consciously made them, obviously not. Beliefs oftentimes are not verbalized. They are felt and they are enacted upon. But somewhere, this had caused that imbalance so that you were taken off the path of what I call positive early direction thinking, or off, the meeting and growing and enhancing of your potential, being the best that you can be. In other words, making choices, being able to rest when you need to rest, not making a whole life of fighting, staying out of the boxing ring, staying out of trouble, so to speak. And the why can perhaps be the state of repair. So if you look at the cause, you can then identify when this was a choice, although be it a knee-jerk, choice, but that oftentimes was, at an earlier, state of you. It was, it was very, it didn't have a lot of experience. It didn't know how to identify this is good for me, this is bad for me. Or it said, we've got all this time, let's just live life, we're young, or whatever, the situation, the excuses that surrounded that is important to understand, because you have to honor that within you and respect yourself for making that choice, albeit, whether not labeling it good or bad, but just as a choice that you made as a way to adapt and adjust to cope with a situation that you did not know how to deal when confronted with. So a narcissist, like an alcoholic, will cause this imbalance because because they don't have empathy. They're not there to acknowledge and validate your feelings. They don't feel for people. They want people to feel for them. It's a one-way street. So if you're, you trying to get your needs met, in order to adapt and adjust, you had to go out of balance to maintain their balance. So you end up sacrificing for the betterment of, or maintaining of the relationship, or really them and the appearances as of. So once again, the narcissist, because of this disorder, when you're really talking about someone who has a pathological sense of self-importance, they're gonna, like a seesaw, throw another out of balance. It's just how they operate. Because they're not recognizing your feelings, they don't like to be human, they live by entitlement, they don't like, to be genuine is scary for them. To be genuine is to be, normal, or kind of, come down to a status quo level. And that's very threatening to a narcissist. It doesn't matter their walk of life, male or female, what country, what socioeconomic status. They're going to want to be that big dog, big cat, whatever it is. Even if they're short, they're going to want to have that all about me mentality. And they're not going to be sensitive to other people's feelings. In fact, to them, to be sensitive to other feelings is to admit weakness. So that's how they think. So you have to understand also how a narcissist thinks, and how you had to go out of balance in order to handle and live through the situation. You had to cope, and oftentimes becoming out of balance. And now you feel like, how do I get back to a normal life? How do I get back to the good life? How do I get back to being happy again? To being happy is to let go of the negativity and what makes you unhappy. So sometimes it's not always in the doing, it's in the undoing. I.e., it's not in the doing, it's what you don't do. It's not what you think, it's what you don't think. It's not what you force yourself to do, it's what you allow yourself. So if you're so used to being programmed to adapting and adjusting and feeling that paranoia, or, wanting to settle the score or fight for your right to be heard, when you're dealing with a narcissist, it's kind of falling on, you're kind of watering, you're not watering a seed for them. It's not going to grow and become something like a bond to them, where you feel then that balance and that harmony, that give and take. It is not in the doing. It's not what you need to do. It's who you now need to be. It's not, how you need to settle the score. It's now how you need to stop keeping score. It's not so much, having to lick your wounds. It's enough to say, I'm letting go of the wound. In other words, I'm letting go of the wounder who has caused this. I'm letting go of that. And it's an awareness, it's a permission. And oftentimes people they're very scared to let that go, because it's what they've been holding on to for so long. This is, my reality, like clinging to it like someone was going to take the only life preserver you had in the middle of an ocean. It makes life look very big and very daunting. Now, you don't stumble upon this because most people who are in relationship with a narcissist have to live in denial. They have to live in repression and suppression, i.e., flicks and flimmers of inspiration come up. I don't need to handle this anymore. I'm going to, and then those momentary, flashes of insight just go, unattended to, unacknowledged, denied, and ignored. Even if it's, what I need to do, what I should do, what I deserve, these little sayings, I really should get insurance for the car, but maybe I'll save money if I don't do it. These are the types of things, maybe we'll just get through it. Maybe we'll just get by. These little things that you don't consciously make, but that end up being made. Your decisions are then unconscious or in the subconscious, but they're still there. They're still part of you. What the spoken word is just a tiny, bit of the iceberg. It's kind of like, all you're seeing is the tip of the iceberg, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff under the water. That's like 95%. You are so much more powerful than you give yourself credit to, and you definitely won't be able to receive that credit if you're in a relationship with a narcissist who is always trying to diminish you, minimize you, who won't allow you to be with an opinion, a position, an attitude, a strength, a talent, a pursuit, a goal, an objective, something you want to talk about, something you want, it's never going to be there. It's always going to be, brushed off like this. They're going to brush people. They just brush people off. And this causes the imbalance to try to, maintain that flow. So it is to understand that, it is letting go of this counterforce that is causing the suffering. So the need to use them as a touchstone, a springboard, when runners, go and then they touch the wall. In other words, you're using it as a guidepost, as a mile marker, using their relationships, how you define yourself. Yes, relationships oftentimes define us, and who we surround ourselves with unequivocally define us. Unequivocally, the people who you surround yourself with will be like how you become. I mean, this is just scientific fact. You will be like the people who you hang around with through their vocabulary, through their profession, through their viewpoints. And that's why it's so very important, like, Think and Grow Rich, have a mastermind. You need to surround yourself with people who can elevate you, who can support and nurture and respect in order for you to feel respected. So if you look at what you've been holding on to, like a mile marker, like defining of you, like a safety blanket that's really not a security blanket, that you're holding on to like an insecurity blanket, it's kind of like, that blanket is really tattered and it really makes my feet cold all the time and it's not working and I'm going to get rid of it. I.e., I'm not going to reference it and keep complaining and saying, my bed's too cold, my relationship's so bad, my relationship's so bad. It's time to get rid of that insecurity blanket. It's time to stop holding on. It's time to stop pulling this around yourself. It's time to stop, keeping that negativity and that imbalance in motion, because part of you has accepted and agreed to maintaining this subconsciously, even if it seems hard to do. It's understanding the cause has created the effect, and then how it's still looking and playing out for you right now, and then letting that go. In other words, not using that relationship as a touchstone for defining how bad you feel. Because you're implicating that they're responsible and that there's a moral, war going on that you're waging within yourself, that you're waging in an unhappiness and a bitterness. It's like sucking on a garlic and wondering why you taste garlic. It's an allowing and awareness state. So, and it's very scary once again, because letting go, it means there's a vastness. It means that there's an ocean. It means that there's a life for you to live. It means that there's opportunity for you to be loved. But if you're still carrying that insecurity, oh, but I was taught I'm untrustworthy. I was taught, You know, I made so many mistakes. And, you know, if you're bringing that into the great wide open, you know, then you're still using that as a touchstone for which to reference within your heart, within your mind, within your verbiage, within your within your neurophysiology, with your neuromodulation, how you modulate your own feelings, how you modulate your own thoughts. So it is understanding that the bravery that it takes to enter into the great wide open. Meaning, what would happen if I didn't use this pain to define me all the time? You know, and letting that go as part of my emotional vocabulary, meaning letting go if I didn't, you know, experience pain and everything is okay, I would really love to. So when I'm not experiencing pain and everything is okay, then I get to. So focus. In order to get that balance back, it's really about the beginning of self-esteem. It's really about allowing that very sacred place which the narcissist has kept you hidden from, you know, like a troll. Like, nope, don't go there. You can't go in. Don't go in. You know, it's like the narcissist is holding you, you know, back from entering into life. You know, they're trying to hold you back and you're like, I want to open the door and I just, you know, but what you really, really want, overriding that feeling of resentment or anger or trying to implicate them for something or get payback or retribution, beyond that, what you really want to do is be happy and live a good life and have relationships. So if you let go of that part of the polarity, life is always going to have polarity. There's always going to be hot and cold, you know, good or bad. There's always going to be that. But if you stop the judgment and then you just fling off all that you have been holding on to from them, you will eventually feel a lightness. And if you get something like a white candle and you just light the candle, and it doesn't have to have any color, you might have other colored candles, but the white candle in particular is very pure and it's very saintly and it's very holy. If you get a white candle for yourself, this is a very significant spiritual gift that you can give, and begin to have that candle and just begin to keep your hands over it for a moment and begin to just look at the flame within your own hands and begin to send that flame love through your hands. And then allow yourself to then bask in that and then fill yourself up in that and then allow yourself to give all the love to yourself that you have been trying to get from this other person, even though they're not able, okay? And then being able to then open up your sphere of influence to others who can then, you know, celebrate that with you will be the beginning of how to get back in balance. Keep yourself in check. Begin to stop.